Welcome to Kardec Radio and another gathering of spirit reports of life after life. We're gathering every Sunday evening at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we're studying Heaven and Hell, the second part of Heaven and Hell, which consists primarily of the different cases, of the different spirits who report back to us of how the transition to the other life happened for them and where they are finding themselves on the other side. So before we continue, I want to quickly look and see that caused a problem. Hello, Tony. Welcome. So nice to see you. Hello. So, yes, Kardec Radio. Thanks to Kardec Radio and the good spirits and our dear friend Vanessa Anzalone, we have this amazing opportunity to gather worldwide, internationally, in classrooms and study and practice the beautiful teachings that Jesus brought to this life, to this world, that Spiritism, that Allan Kardec codified and made it so user-friendly that we have no more excuses other than to study and practice. Right, dear friends? Hello, Saul. Welcome. So nice to see you, dear friend. So, let us look back to the last couple of times. What did we cover so far? So for those of you who come in for the first time, you have a little bit of a connection of what we're actually talking about. So we started off with chapter 1 of part 2 of Heaven and Hell, which is called the transition. And there we learned that our transition is different in every single person's life. But we have all one or two or three things in common. One is that our life in our physical body is limited. Our physical body will die at some point and fall off. So we all will experience that moment. And we also are usually a little scared of that moment, and it is primarily due to the fear of pain. And in this particular chapter called Transition of Heaven and Hell, we learned that we can actually do something about that level of pain today. We can prepare ourselves for the transition. And how do we do that? So first of all, why do some spirits experience more pain before, during, and after their transition to the other life? Well, the reason is because their perispirit is more connected to the body. If the perispirit is more strongly connected to the body before, in particular during the transition moment, there will be more pain that the soul experiences. There will be less pain, the less the body and perispirit are connected. And secondly, there is such a thing as the state of confusion. The state of confusion is quite popular, I want to say, among us spirits here on earth. Most of us experience it to a certain degree. It can last anywhere from a few minutes to several hours, and of course, many, many years. And this state of confusion can start already before our transition, but primarily lasts after. It takes place afterwards. So what can we do to help our transition along? What can we do today? I just said we have it in our own hands. So how? Well, we can work and need to work on our moral state, because it's exactly the moral state that determines of how connected our perispirit is to our body, how painful our transition will be. And our moral state is linked to how materialistic we are. How much are we still linked to matter? Our house, our home, even our families, our cars, vacations, clothing, whatever, food, anything. And so the less we are connected to matter, of course, the easier our transition will be. And what can we do to help ourselves with our moral transformation? Well, one thing is we can study, we educate ourselves. The best way is, and we all know it, is Spiritism. It's very user-friendly. It brings us all the information that we've ever wanted in a very easy to digest way. Thanks to Alan Kardec, of course, thanks to Jesus, thanks to God, most and foremost, thanks to Jesus, Alan Kardec, the codifier of Spiritism, all the good spirits, André Louise, Emmanuel, you name it, all these good spirits, we know them all, right? And then, of course, the incarnates, Kardec Radio, our teachers, our groups, our members, all of this helps us to study, to help us with our inner transformation, to study and to practice the teachings. And then, of course, it also helps us to remind ourselves at least once a day, I think it was Joanna de Angelis who said that, of our transition, so that it is in our minds. And by just reminding ourselves, it loosens our connection a little bit. It creates a gap. The little noise in the background is my refrigerator. I apologize. So before I say hi to all the friends that are coming in, I want to just go back to the two cases we've so far discussed. 2 weeks ago, we talked about Mr. Sanson or Sanson. Mr. Sanson was the first spirit. He was a happy spirit, and he was a spiritist, and he suffered. He said that the suffering we experience during our lifetimes on earth will be repaid tenfold through blessings. So he encouraged us to take our suffering, the hardship of life, in strides, knowing that we will be rewarded tenfold if we take our suffering in strides, we resign to it, and we surrender, and we don't complain. And he said also that we're helping our ways, helping ourselves with our transition through living wisely, he says, living virtuously in the spirit of charity and love. We know living virtuously, the highest virtue of all is charity. And we know that charity was defined by the good spirits, the illuminated spirits in the Spirits book, as benevolence towards all, indulgence towards the imperfection of others, and forgiveness towards others' offenses. So that is what Mr. Sanson said: live wisely, virtuously in the spirit of charity and love. And then he also said that you will be happy on the other side after you have practiced this. Then last week we talked about the second spirit account, and that was Mr. Samuel Philip. Mr. Samuel Philip also was a happy spirit. He was a righteous man, and he taught us, he emphasized, to love our enemies. Yes, to love our enemies, which is a high stake. It is not easy for us here on earth to love our enemies. We have a whole chapter dedicated to this subject in the Gospel according to Spiritism. And we know that we need to forgive and understand in order to make at least an attempt to love our enemies. He also taught us about, Mr. Philip also taught us about resignation, and we looked it up in the Spirits book, and we learned that resignation is the surrender of the heart. We learned that obedience is the surrender of reason, and resignation is the surrender of our heart. A very beautiful thing, and not always easy. And then he asked us to have courage in the face of adversity. Remember, Mr. Sanson says that our suffering will be repaid with blessings tenfold. And he just presented it a little bit differently, but in a way said the same thing. Have courage in the face of adversity. Don't give up, ever. Continue. And he also encouraged us to forgive the offenses of others. And he also taught us that our problems, our challenges that we experience during our lives on earth are for our own good. Remember, Mr. Sanson says that we get repaid with blessings because our challenges are for our own good. So many beautiful lessons we got already through those cases. And before we continue on with our next spirit account tonight, I want to say hi to our friends. So let us look. Let us see who is all here. Yes, we said hello to Tony, and we said hello to Sol. Thank you so much for joining. Hello, Sol. Then hello, Renata Casadei. So lovely to have you. Caroline Correa, welcome, dear friend. It's a pleasure. Nora Bazil is also watching. Welcome, Nora. And there's Yara Govea. Thank you so much, Yara, for joining us. And Sol is saying we need to work ourselves with love. Yes, we need to learn love, don't we, Sol? If we love ourselves first, we can love others as well. And that is really a very important point, Sol. You're absolutely right. Because all of this always starts with ourselves. We have to give it to ourselves most and foremost. And only when we've given it to ourselves can we actually give it to others. So thank you for raising that point, Sol. Very grateful for that. Then there's Melissa Deline. Thank you, Melissa, for joining. And Rob Brown. Thanks, Robbie. Thanks for joining. Robbie and Tony are part of the Divine Light Spiritist Center, which we founded here in Nevada County, Northern California, in Nevada City. We're a small community of 3,000 some people, believe it or not, but we do have a Spiritist Center now, thanks to the good spirits, and a beautiful amount of members. We're coming together, we're studying and practicing. And there is also Tommy Liu. Welcome, Tommy. So let us get started, dear friends. So today we're going to go to heaven and hell to our third case, and that is Mr. Van Durst. Van Durst, I'm saying, because he sounds Dutch, and I'm German, and German and Dutch, the languages are pretty close. So I'm just going to give it, maybe, forgive me if you're Dutch and you know better, but I think Van Durst is a little closer than Van Durst, but whatever we're saying, we're talking about the same spirit. So that is on page 259, if you have Heaven and Hell and you would like to read along. So Mr. Van Durst was a former civil servant, and he died in Antwerp, which is in Holland, in 1863 at the ripe age of 80 years old. After a short time after Van Durst's passing, he was evoked, and this is what he had to say. My friend, my life weighed very little on the scales of eternity. Nevertheless, I am far from being unhappy. I am in a humble situation, but relatively happy for someone who, without striving for perfection, committed few wrongs. So Mr. Van Durst was a civil servant, and he finds himself to be quite happy, yet he lived a life that was not marked by striving for perfection, and he finds himself in a humble yet happy position on the other side. And here he says something quite important now. Let's pay attention to that. I regret only one thing. Very important. I regret only one thing, which is that I myself did not know then what I do now. For my state of confusion would have been shorter and less difficult. So let us pause, dear friends. This is a really important statement where we can learn a lot. So he's giving us a clue. He's giving us a wonderful teaching. He's helping us. He's telling us to educate ourselves. He is regretful that he didn't know better before he transitioned. He learned a lot, apparently, after his transition, even though he only transitioned a few days ago, I apologize. And yet he already knows more. Now that is something that we can change today. And he says that as a result of his ignorance, his level of ignorance, he experienced a state of confusion which caused him quite a bit of pain. Now let us go to the Spirit's book for a moment. Let us educate ourselves about the state of confusion. If you'd like to go along with me, you can pull up the Spirits book and we go to page 161. Page 161. And it is question 164. 164 on page 161. And Allan Kardec asks the illuminated spirits, do all spirits experience the confusion that follows the separation of the soul and body to the same degree and for the same amount of time? Very interesting question. Allan Kardec and we are curious as to whether the state of confusion is the same for everyone. And let us see what the good spirits tell us. The answer is no. It depends on how evolved the spirits are. Those who are already purified are almost immediately self-aware because of their detachment from matter during corporeal life. However, carnal individuals with impure consciences retain the impression of matter much longer. Remember at the opening of our tonight's gathering, we mentioned that we can prepare ourselves through our inner transformation and dematerialization in our lives today, which means we are turning away from matter little by little. And here we're hearing it again. It says the detachment from matter during corporeal life determines how long we will be suffering from the state of confusion. And I'm suffering because in a minute we will hear how that looked like for Mr. Van Durst. So, very important. It's not the same for everyone. Since it's not the same for everyone, that means we can make a difference about it in our own lives through our moral transformation. It's in our own hands. How wonderful is that? How empowering is that? How long we will be experiencing the state of confusion. And now let us see what Mr. Van Durst tells us about this. And I invite you, if you can, and you're not driving or you're in any position where you need to have your eyes open, to just sit back, close your eyes, and visualize the torment he is describing to us, and really feeling our way into the experience of the state of confusion that Mr. Van Durst had. Because only when we feel those moments can we really make a difference, because then it touches our hearts, it touches our conscience, and hopefully will help us, propel us forward to make changes, to prepare ourselves starting today. So dear friends, here we go. So Mr. Van Durst says the following. That state of confusion was lengthy. Feeling and not feeling alive. Seeing my body and feeling strongly connected to it, but unable to use it. Seeing those whom I love and sensing the thought that connected me to them vanish. How awful. Oh, what a cruel time! ! He says. What a moment when bewilderment takes you into its grip and strangles you! And immediately afterward, total darkness. Feeling alive and then an instant later feel non-existent. Wanting to be aware of yourself, but unable to grasp it. Not existing, but in a profound state of confusion, sensing that you do in fact exist nonetheless. And then after an incalculable amount of time, a time of suffocating anguish because you can't comprehend it, a time that seems unending, you are slowly reborn to a new existence. You awaken to a new world. I hope, dear friends, we all got a little bit of a taste of that state. It seems extremely uncomfortable. And why wouldn't we want to reduce that torment before, during, and after our transition. Today, by educating ourselves, practicing the teachings, becoming less material beings. I have a sense that my little dog will bark in a minute because there it is. I apologize terribly. I don't know what to do. This is life with a dog. I have guests coming and he will bark until we'll work through it. It is part of our challenge. So, let us continue, dear friends. So, he had quite a lengthy state of confusion. He says, no physical body, no earthly life, but immortal life. That was his wake-up call. That is when he woke up out of his state of confusion. Just a moment. Teddy, so quiet. You know these people. So he continues to say, having space before you and being able to travel it at will, that was his new experience. He woke up to a life beyond earth, and he realized this was the immortal life. And it was a spirit life. He saw other spirits flying around him, gliding by on all sides, circulating around him. Okay, Tim. Alright. Okay. He saw spirits gliding by everywhere, circulating around him. And he felt he had intense amount of space around him. And he was able to travel during that space at will. It was a great relief for him to wake up from the state of confusion. And we are now on page 260 in Heaven and Hell. And then he says, communicating through thought with everything that surrounds you, ... It was something he was marveling at, that now everyone, including himself, was able to communicate through thought with everything that surrounded him. My friend, what an entirely new life, he says. What a dazzling life. What a blessed life. Oh, hail, he says. Hail to you, O eternity. You have taken me into your heart. Farewell, O earth. You kept me for so long from my true spirit nature. No, I would not request anything else from you, for you are the earth of exile, and your greatest happiness is nothing to me any longer. Wonderful, right, dear friends? So here he went to this incredible agony of the state of confusion, and then he awakens to his eternal life. And the one thing that he finds most amazing is communicating through thought with everything that surrounds him. Let us pause for a moment and let us look at that a little bit deeper. Let us go to Genesis. Genesis is another book by Allan Kardec, the last one. And we go to page 290. Genesis, page 290. It is the chapter called The Fluids. And we go to item 14. Let us understand how the spirits are able to communicate just by pure thought. Let us see how that can be. And here we're finding the answer. Spirits act upon the spiritual fluids. We know that we're surrounded by the universal cosmic fluid everywhere, right? So spirits act upon the spiritual fluids, but they do not manipulate them like humans manipulate gases. Instead, they use the help of thought and will. Here it is, dear friends. It is with the help of thought and will that spirits manipulate the spiritual fluids. Thought and will are for spirits what hands are to humans. By means of thought, they impress upon the fluids this or that direction. Isn't that interesting, friends? So here we're learning that spirits use the fluids, the spiritual fluids, for the transmission of thoughts, just as we humans in our body use our hands to manipulate things. And we learn in chapter 10 of Thought and Life by Emmanuel that the will, remember he says thought and will are for spirits what hands are to humans. Why does he say thought and will? Well, in chapter 10 of Thought and Life by the Spirit Emmanuel through Chico Xavier, we learn that our mind's CEO, the boss of our minds, is the will, our will. Without the will, nothing will happen, correct? We all know that when we wake up in the morning and our will doesn't want to get up, we won't get up. We all know that when we have a thought pattern that we can only change it with the help of our willpower. And then in Thought and Life we learn that the will needs to be educated. But that is we're not going to go that far. But suffice it to say that the will and thought work together. The will is the boss of our thinking. So then when we go to the next page in Genesis, item 15, we continue on to learn, since the fluids are the vehicle for thought, thought acts upon the fluids as sound acts upon the air. Now that we can imagine, right? Thought acts upon the fluids as sound acts upon the air. Fluids bring thought to us just as the air brings sound. Now, dear friends, we have a much easier time to understand why Mr. van Durst communicates to us that the spirits were able to communicate their thoughts just at will. They didn't need anything else. Thought just traveled through the fluids and reached every spirit, and they knew what needed to be communicated. So let us continue. But if I had only known, he says now, that what I know now, how much easier and pleasant the beginning of this other life would have been. And he reminds us again of his regret that he mentioned a little bit earlier. His one and only big regret, that he did not know then, before his transition, what he knows now after his transition, which is really our most important lesson for tonight. That we want and need to prepare ourselves, and we can prepare ourselves. So then he says, I would have already known before dying what I had to learn much later at the moment of separation. I had to learn, and my soul would have been freed much more easily from earthly matter. So he tells us, if we prepare ourselves, and if he had been more prepared through studying, through thinking about his transition, through his moral transformation, through his inner transformation, he would have had an easier time and would have shortened or maybe taken away completely his state of confusion. Let us pause again and let us recap. From chapter 1, we can prepare ourselves through what? How can we prepare ourselves today for our inner transformation, to shorten the suffering of our soul and the state of confusion? Well, one is working on our inner transformation, our moral development. We work on dematerializing our lives, we're educating ourselves, and what we study, we practice, and we think about our excarnation at least once a day. And we learned through Mr. Sanson that part of the preparation is to live wisely, to live virtuously in the spirit of charity and love. And we know that charity is defined as benevolence towards all, indulgence towards the imperfection of others, and forgiveness of offenses. So these are all things. This is our to-do list. And hopefully we remember the to-do list every single day, and we can kind of check off, okay, done, done, done. And the beautiful thing is, if we do our nightly review, as St. Augustine recommends to us, both in the Spirit's book as well as the Gospel according to Spiritism, we see how our day was. Where do we need to make more amends? Where do we need to change? Where do we need to work on ourselves a little bit more? So then we go to the Spirit's book, page 161, because we're not quite done and we need to learn a little bit more. So if you want to follow along, Spirit's book, page 161. And this is in alignment with our preparation to reduce our soul suffering and the state of confusion before, during, and after our transition. Remember, friends, earlier we looked at the same page in the Spirit's book, and we read question 164, which was, do all spirits experience the same type of state of confusion? And we learned that the illuminated spirits don't, and then there's different gradations from there. And here we read the small print on page 161, which will help us understand this state of confusion and preparation a little bit more. At the moment of death, everything appears confused at first. The soul needs some time to recognize itself. It feels dazed, like someone waking out of a deep sleep, who tries to understand the situation. The lucidity of its ideas and the memory of its past return as the influence of the matter from which it has just freed itself is extinguished by the sort of fog that had obscured its thoughts is dissipated. So again, the lucidity of its ideas and the memory of its past return as the influence of matter from which it has just freed itself is extinguished. And remember, friends, we can work on reducing our connection to matter today. The duration of the state of confusion following death varies greatly. It may last a few hours, several months, or several years. The ones who experience it for the least amount of time are those who have identified themselves with their future state during life, because they immediately understand their situation and how, again, we're repeating it because we don't want to forget, right? How can we identify ourselves with our future state during our life right now? How can we prepare ourselves for our future life? Well, we work on our moral transformation, educate ourselves, we practice love, charity, we're forgiving, we dematerialize our lives. We do not want to amass more money, we just want the money we need to survive, and then we remember to share. All those things, there's a whole list, we all know it, right? And it's important that we just not only know it, but we actually practice it every day a little bit more. This is how we prepare ourselves for our immortality, for our immortal life, for our spirit life. And then there is a couple of more sentences. There is nothing painful about the state of confusion following death for moral individuals, those who have prepared themselves. They are calm, and their perceptions are those of a peaceful awakening. However, for those whose conscience is not pure, it is full of anxiety and anguish, which intensifies as it regains self-awareness. So friends, I think we've made it clear of where our work lies, how we can prepare ourselves, right? And now in closing, he says, one last thing that is important. He says, tell this to my son. By this he means to prepare himself and not do what he did go into his transition unprepared, which caused him pain. Now, when he says, "Tell this to my son," he's really telling us. We are his sons, just like his son was his son. We are the universal family he is speaking to, and we need to take it at heart, as much as his son hopefully did. And that is what's so important about these messages. We're so blessed to have these messages at our availability, so we can learn from others who've gone before us. Mr. Van Durst closes by saying, "Goodbye to all of you, my friends, goodbye. I am waiting for you, and during the time in which you remain on the earth, I will often join you to learn beside you, because I still do not know as much as many of you. Goodbye. I will leave you now. Goodbye." So this was Mr. Van Durst. A beautiful lesson, dear friends. I think we understood what we need to do. We can do it. It's at our availability. We can easily practice. We have our list, our little to-do list. And by practicing charity and the golden rule, we can never go wrong. In closing, I would like to do a little prayer for us. And the prayer that we want to share with you tonight is the beautiful prayer of Saint Francis, or also the prayer of peace. And we're sharing this prayer because we believe that it teaches us, it helps us to work on our moral transformation. If you can, please close your eyes and have your palms rest loosely on your thighs, and open your hearts and minds and connect with God, our beloved Jesus, guide and model, and all the good spirits, the spirit doctors, our own angels, our own teachers, our mentors. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. And where there is sadness, joy. O Divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, as to understand, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love with all my soul. For it is in giving that we receive. It is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Dear friends, in closing, I want to look at the beautiful messages and see that I haven't overlooked anything. Tommy Lee is from the Andre Louise Spiritist Center in Tampa, Florida. Welcome, dear friend. We're so honored to have you. And then we have Robbie, spiritual pain. We learned at the beginning of Heaven and Hell that it's actually the soul that experiences pain, which means the spirit. We know that the spirit is called soul while it is in the flesh, while we're incarnated. And it is the spirit-soul that experiences the pain, and it feels that pain through the physical form while it is incarnated. And from the spirit accounts, it sounds like spirits without a body, of course, feel pain as well. Because Mr. Van Durst told us how painful this state of confusion was, and that state of confusion he experienced after he was out of his body. And there is soul, We should pray, yes. And Paulo Santos, yes, they can feel all kinds of pain, like spiritual pain, according to their conception on evolution. Exactly. Thank you so much for helping, Paulo Santos. Soul is a beautiful, yes, beautiful. You are beautiful too, Soul. And very clear, thank you. It's good to know, to learn, to prepare ourselves, because when we know, when we are going to the other side, then we know, Soul, you're absolutely right. And that is why we're here, and that's why we're meeting. We will be back this coming Thursday, which is July 4th. Cardiac Radio is celebrating its eighth anniversary. What a blessing. Aren't we grateful for Cardiac Radio? We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Cardiac Radio. And I also want to extend my deepest gratitude to Dr. Vanessa Anzalone, our dear friend, and all of you Brazilians who speak English and bring Spiritism to the United States. I do not speak Portuguese, and if it wasn't for you guys, I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't be able to prepare myself for my transition and for eternal life. I wouldn't know what Spiritism is, and I do want to give a shout out to our friends in Florida right now, but the founder of Bisea Spiritual Healing Center, Tanya Stewart and Greg Stewart, who opened the center 10 years ago together with us, but it was their initiative, and they did it in English. Thank God they did it in English, so we were able to learn. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Cardiac Radio. We'll see you again on the 4th of July from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Different speakers will be on Cardiac Radio Live and reporting different things, having different shows. I will be on at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, and we will do another case of heaven and hell, another happy spirit. So stay tuned. Much love, friends. Thank you. Good night.